we talked about the switch statement. You can use switch statements with enumeration as well as the other major types. A difference between this language and some others: in C++, you could not switch on strings. In Java, you can. In this language, you can. Makes sense that in this language you can as well, because this is Microsoft's answer to Java after a lawsuit. So their explanation of enums here is not as good as the one that I gave y'all as extra credit, I believe. So if I go look at my assignment here that I had y'all do, I'm going to take a quick peek at it, a lecture based on it. I would like for y'all to know it. That's why we're going to hit it. Or did I not?
No, it's in the assignments.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But did I make it extra credit, or is it just
It's
an assignment?
It was extra credit.
yeah, your
Alright.
quotations around extra credit.
All right, okay. Anyways. Yeah, I see. The document itself is called extra credit. The folder was not. Okay, the idea behind an enum is it's your own type that you're defining, rather than a predetermined type that they give you. So you can create a variable. Well, so our text here is enum color, and then we list the possible values of the enum. So we could create an enum variable and set it equal to any of these values, but only these values. Now behind it all, each one of these is an int. We could write a console app and cast these things to int and find out what they are behind the scenes. And if you want to change those values, when you create it, you can. I believe you can just say red is equal to 10, green is equal to 20, blue is equal to 30, if you had some reason for specifying the integer values. Now, if you want to, and this language is much nicer to use enums than Java is, you can convert from the text of the name here, red, green, blue, to the enum itself. You have a get values function, which will convert the enum to the text version of it through some magic. It's not like we specify the text names of this, which would be kind of neat if you could specify that you want red to be like, in French or something like that, and these were the colors, but you wanted to provide a translation. Well, you can't quite do that, but you can get the values of them, and so when you print them out, it's going to print red, green, and blue. So here's an example of declaring a variable of that type, color, their color. Then if you want, and you have some text, you can convert a string back to an enum. So you can go from an enum to a string, and then you can go back from a string to an enum. Now you should be able to go to an int as well. So let's look at the PowerPoint's example of that. Here they declare an enum called major. They decide that the first value of the enum is going to be a 1. So accounting is 1, and then CIS in English, and then math and marketing. So we're pretty sure that that's going to be a 2, and a 3, and a 4, and a 5. So here's a different way. You can convert from an int to one of these. So they just say write, enter major code, right, and then convert to int 32, read line. So they've read the major. Now they're going to convert it from an int to it. Well, that implies that whoever's doing this knows that accounting means 1 and CIS means 2 and English means 3. So you can convert from a text to an enum value, or you can convert from an int to an enum value. And here this is kind of odd. Because if major, they cast major to an int, right, by converting it to an int, so they switched it based on an int, and they did all this. Now, you shouldn't have to do that. If you create an enum variable of that type, like I did with color, then when you do a switch on it, then the switch doesn't have to be converted to an int before you do it to a switch. So I want to play with that just a little bit. Just because I don't think I did enum justice in my other languages. So what lecture is this? Is this lecture G or something? C#. I know I already have a lecture G from another class, so I'm going to call mine G2. So, I'm going to create an enum called fruit. And I'm going to have several fruit. Apple, orange, banana. And I've done the syntax wrong. Looks like. It's yelling at me about all these. Only assignment, call, and new object expressions can be used as a statement. What have I done wrong there? Oh, you have to declare your enum outside, excuse me, my mistake, outside of any code context. So we're going to make it part of the namespace. I wonder if it can be part of the class though. So I'm going to yank my enum. And just as an experiment, I'm going to make it part of the class. That works. So you can make an enum part of the class, or you can make it part of the namespace. If you made it part of the namespace, it'd be easy to refer to it from another app. Well, we're still getting an error here. A getter and accessor method expected, so. Is it because I have enum capitalized? I should have just copied and pasted. Nope, that's the problem. Alrighty, we're gonna. Makes me kind of wonder what the difference between an uppercase enum and a lowercase is, but we pretty much are of agreement that anything that begins with an uppercase is probably a class definition or a namespace definition. So I was breaking it when I did that. So that did work. Sticking it as a class member or sticking it as a namespace definition. Either one works. I'm curious enough to type in enum and well, see, now it's trying to force me. It's trying to correct my mistake. I'm going to look it up if I can. So I'm just going to highlight it, hit F1. Enum class provides a base class for definitions. Examples. Well, that's lowercase enums. I don't want lowercase enums. I want uppercase. Forget it. I don't see the uppercase. Okay, so I'm going to leave that alone. That's how you declare it. Why are we getting static here? Oh, because I have enum there. Alrighty, now back on track. So I'm going to create a fruit, right? Fruit, F1, is equal to apple. But that's not going to work because in this language it wants you to prefix the name apple with the name of the enum. So we're going to do fruit. Is it fruit.apple? Yep, like that. And we could create another fruit that was an orange and another fruit that was a banana. So we do this. Console.writeLine or F1 equals, and let's do placeholder 0, int equals, and then let's do placeholder 1. And so let's print out the value of F1, and then let's cast it to an int. See if that'll work, or if we have to use convert to int, as the textbook shows. We may have to. So it says the fruit is an apple, the int is a 1. Let's see if I change it to an orange, what the print has to say about it. So f1 is an orange, int equals 1. So that works. What we might see is if we could change these values. What happens if we decide that an apple, I really want my iteration, my enumeration to start at 100. So, by my guess, orange should be 101. I'm not specifying it, but I would expect it to be sequential past that point. Yep. Can we specify a value for each one? Can we say an apple is 100 and orange is 200? Yes, you can. All right. So why is that cool? Well, if you're creating something and it's supposed to be shuttling values around, but those values are supposed to be atomic, they're supposed to be discrete, they can only be one of a certain set of values, then enums are a way to force that, right? You can list which values, that another developer is supposed to use, or you yourself to prevent mistakes, and then when you declare a method, you can say, okay, this will accept a fruit, and so it can only accept a fruit. And then it's impossible for that method to get an invalid value. So for example, in my class, if I create another called, print fruit, and it's going to accept a fruit as its parameter, now I'm just going to copy that printf statement. And I forgot to make it a return type. So static void print fruit. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to take the right line that I had here. I'm going to cut it and paste it into there. But just change it to F rather than F1 because that's the name of my parameter. And then I'm going to print my fruit, right? Print fruit. F, like that. All right. Excuse me, F1. It ought to do the exact same thing that it did before. The advantage is that this function can only accept a valid value, right? We don't even have to add any error handling. There may need to be some error handling somewhere else in order to convert that, whatever it read into one of those enums. But once you have a value stored in your enum, you don't need to sweat it. You know that it's one of the acceptable values. And so back in the olden days of Windows programming, you had to write what was called an event loop or an event handler. And it would need to respond to a whole bunch of messages that the Windows operating system could generate, like a move or a minimize or whatever. And you still see some of that when you're creating a WPF or a Forms application and you can create different events. But what you would do, or what Microsoft would do, is create an enum with a list of all the possible events. Let's see if I can find a really quick example of that. Windows events enum. That's not quite what I'm wanting to find. If I can't find it in about 20 more seconds, I'm going to leave it alone. Not finding it. Going to leave it alone. But that way, Microsoft gets to dictate which events. And if it's stored in an enum, whether it's an enum that you create or whatever, then when you're handling the events, if you put it in an enum and you make your functions handle, that particular type of enum, you don't have to worry that you're being given an incorrect value, a value that's not acceptable. So obviously, this only works if you have discrete values. We can set up a switch, and we can switch based on that enum. Switch our fruit. And then down in here, we could do case fruit dot, orange, colon, and we could do something based on that fact. I have put this code in the wrong place. I needed to put inside of main. Excuse me. I'm going to cut that, go down and put it inside of main. Whatever we were supposed to do. System.outline. Excuse me, system. Console.writeLine. And we know that's going to work. And I've got to put a break. In this language, breaks are mandatory. All right. You don't even have to put a default, really. Well, yeah, you want to put a default in case, a new fruit class has been added, a new fruit enumerator has been added. Like if we go back here and we add, kiwi or something like that, strawberry, then we would want to know whether the switch, had not been expanded or not. So we might want to put an error message there in a default, just to tell ourselves to go in and fix that as well. So if you have some text and you want to convert it to an enum, like this, if we've asked the user what their favorite fruit is, and we're going to say that our favorite fruit is an apple, we just ask the user that and they typed it in. So I'm going to just call it a string S to be absolutely boring. Then you can do that. And when you get your fruit, you can do enum.tryparse. Just like any other tryparse, it will return a true or false, whether it's successful or not. And honestly, I don't remember what that second parameter of enum.tryparse is. This is a little bit different because you see what we're doing here is we're having this, here's our enum class, right? So it looks like the enum class is full of methods, helper methods. So anyways, what we can do, let's duplicate that. Is let's declare a new fruit, fruit F2, and then bool BOK, and then BOK is equal to enum.tryparse, and we need to specify what we're parsing. We're parsing a fruit. Fruit is a type, but it's being used like a variable. Okay, let me go back and see when I have my example. Not getting it. I'm going to go ahead and blaze on and see if that fixes itself. So S followed by true, followed by the word out in the variable that we want to store it into. Okay, that did correct it. That was a spurious error. I just had not typed it. All right, I really am curious about that one. So I'm going to highlight tryparse here, hit F1, see if we get some. What is that doing? Oh, case sensitive or not? That's pretty cool, right? So let's see if this is actually has to be case sensitive or not. I'm going to make it lowercase apple, and since that's set to true, I bet that the conversion is not going to work. So if we print out the value of BOK, console.writeLine BOK equals placeholder 0. I'm expecting to see false. I'm expecting to see this fail. And what do you know? It worked. So let's change that to false. Okay, so false means case has to be exact. True means that it's case insensitive. That's kind of swapped from what I would have expected. Anyways, so that's kind of cool. If we're reading from a text file, we could convert the text into enums, of whatever form. And if it fails, then BOK is going to be set to false, and you have to handle that however you decide to. All right, that may be enough about enum. I recall that my assignment had one more thing, which is where you can iterate through the enumerator for every color in, and then we're going to enumerate all the values of color. This looks a lot like the range statement in Python or something like that. For X in, and then you give a list, or for X in range or whatever. But we're enumerating, we're getting all the values from a specific type. And And so we're using the enum class, the capital enum class, in order to do that, to get the values. All right, now I'm curious enough about the enum class. I want to see what kind of goodies it's got in it. So I'm just going to type enum dot, all right, get name, get values, parse, equals, format. I wonder what format does. Well, there's lots of goodness there that you could look up if you want to start using enum seriously. What have I done wrong? Oh, I deleted my book. All right, excuse me, but I'm going to remove some spurious spaces here so I can get a lot of code on the screen at the same time, and so you can pause it to make sure that you agree with how it's working. All right, so this is inside a main. That's all the code that we've typed so far, except there's a read key underneath it. Pause if you're trying to get it right. Go and look at the notes if you can. We need to scroll this over so you can see what that is. And then we added one method. We added this method. Now, we haven't talked about methods enough yet. We haven't talked about creating our own classes. But this had to be static because this is static. And if you're inside a static method inside a class, then the only other methods you can call in the same class also have to be static. The same is true for variables. Like if we create a variable here, int x, that's part of the class. Then inside here, if we wanted to use it, too bad, unless we made it static, right? So we could say static. Now technically what static means is that there's one and only one in the project. Rather than, normally if you have a class, you can create as many different objects as you want, and we could store as many different values in there as we wanted to. There is only one space in memory for a value x. Doesn't matter how many different objects you create or whether you even create any of them. There's only one. And if you've taken C++, you may remember another use of the word static, which is to declare a variable that does not lose its value inside a method. Like inside here, inside our print fruit, if we wanted to increment some value inside it, and we didn't want it to lose its value between calls, because normally variables lose their value as soon as that method is done. You could do, I want a static int, and it could very well be that, yep, C# does not even support that usage. And that's okay because Java doesn't either. So that's a C++ and a C only thing. Forget I said anything about it. So the conditional operator. You can take in Java or C, C++. You've seen this before. It's kind of odd, but it's a question mark and it's called the ternary operator. Some people do because it takes 3 operands rather than 2. There's a test expression, and then there's a result if it's true, and there's a result if it's false. So we're going to write line something. What are we going to write? Well, we're going to check test score. If the test score is greater than 60, then we're going to print pass. Else we're going to print fail. So we can add something silly like that to our code, right? We have a value for a fruit. We just tried to parse it. So if be okay, I'm going to change that back to a true because I liked the case insensitivity of it. So my enum now says tryparse s, true, out. So if the parsing worked, then let's create a string. I'm just going to call it out. And out is equal to, and I'm going to have a comparison. And I'm going to put it inside parentheses, but that's not strictly necessary, but I think it makes it easy to read. So if f2 equals fruit dot apple question mark, then what we want out set to is the word yum colon yuck. So if that expression is true, then this string excuse me, but out is a keyword. Can't do that. So I'm going to call it s out. So s out, and then s out is equal to that. So if our fruit is, in fact, fruit.apple, then s out will wind up being this word, yum. Otherwise, s out is going to be set to yuck. And we can prove that. console dot write line S out. Okay, I had this silly variable created up here, x is equal to 100. So if you were typing along exactly with what I typed, get rid of that. Apologize for that. And I hope it wasn't there when I paused it and told you to type it in. Okay, so it said yum because fruit 2 was in fact an apple, not that we printed it out. Guess we could. We could console.writeLine. Let's just write line the fruit itself without converting it to a string or anything. Plus a space, plus this out. And this is just for my own curiosity. Is it going to convert that to a string on the fly, as I expect it will? Yep, apple yum. All right, that's about enough of enums. We have seen the ternary operator, also known as the conditional operator. Some people really like it. I kind of think that maybe it makes the text unclear. If I was writing code that I wanted to be, understandable by somebody who I wasn't sure was an expert, I might skip it. They may not have seen it before.
Elegant code.
Pardon me?
I was reading about it online. There's a cult of people who want to cram as much into one line as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Some people like to put as much code in one line as possible, and they think that it makes it easy. But I would rather, honestly, use it as statement, right? So if f2 is equal to fruit dot apple, then s out is equal to yum colon else s out is equal to yuck, whatever. And if you were a maniac, you could even put all of that in one line if you wanted to. But yeah, it is a terser way of doing it. Why am I getting errors here?
I figure readability.
Oh, equal, not equal. There we go. Yes, sir?
I was going to say, readability for the next person who's reading your code is important.
It is, right. Readability is awfully important. So, like I said, if I was writing code for myself, maybe I would do it like that because, I have seen it often enough that I'm sure it's readable. But if I was going to leave it for somebody else to modify and I wasn't sure of their level, then I would probably write it like that because that's much more readable to my eyes. All right, so the not operator. Not just reverses the truthiness. Colbert used to say truthiness all the time. So if you have an expression that's true, the exclamation point makes it false. And if the Boolean expression is false, it makes it true. So we have some logic here that apparently dictates that we really like apples. But if we put an exclamation point in front of it, that reverses it. And it's not liking that. Maybe I could put parens around that, and it does work, right? So this is telling us, evaluate this expression, and then flip it. So now it's going to only say yum if the fruit is not an apple. Otherwise, say yuck. Now, would I do it like that? No, of course not. I would say f2 not equal to fruit dot apple, right? That's what I would do. But you can do that, and if the expression seems to be clearer with a not, then fine, use it. Now, to my eyes, nots are throwing negatives into the expression. It's like, if, like in the English language, if you have double negatives, it's harder to understand the sentence, right? I do not have no apples, right? That means I have apples. That's a bad example, but you know what I mean. I could Google it, double negatives, and you'd understand. But you're probably already familiar with the term. It makes it harder for our brains to parse. The computer doesn't care. Whatever the expression is, it will evaluate it. But if I have an expression with a not, I'll take some time to see if I can reword it in such a way that I don't need a not. And let's see if I can come up with something, an example of that, where we could rewrite an expression in such a way that it didn't have a not. Now, obviously, that's one case, right? If you have if x, or if not x is less than 3, then what's the opposite of that? Not x greater than 3. x greater than or equal to 30, right? You got to include the equal then, because otherwise, it's not a true flip of the case. And you do have to kind of remember that. The opposite of less than is greater than or equal to. The opposite of greater than is less than or equal to. And the opposite of equal is not equal. Okay, so if we had this expression for some reason, if not temperature greater than 32 and temperature less than 212. And I wanted to flip that. You can use something called De Morgan's law. You can't just go in here and say, I'm going to remove this and change these to their opposites. You might wish that you could, but you can't. If you're flipping, let me change it back to the way it was. If you're flipping an expression that has an and or an or, it's a compound, then here's what you got to do. If it's not A or B, then what it is, once you expand it, is not A and not B. That's De Morgan's law. And the reverse is true as well. Not A and B becomes not A or not B. So if I was going to rewrite this to get rid of the parentheses, if I was going to try to expand it, I could do that. I'm just going to copy and paste it to try and make it a little bit easier. I could say not t is greater than 32 or not t less than 212, right? I don't know if I have my parentheses right or not, but that's close. So there we go. We have expanded it. Is that easier to read? Not yet. But what is the not of t greater than 32? T less than 32. And what's the opposite of, t less than or equal to 32. And what's the opposite of t less than 212? T greater than or equal to 212. So there we go. I hope you see that we took this expression and we rewrote it to look like that. We cleaned it up using De Morgan's law. I don't recall if the book talks about that or not. You can look it up if you want to. I think I'll cut this and paste it down here. And I'll put, expanded and then simplified. And are there other things you can do to simplify this stuff? Yeah, you could always store the value in an expression first, and then, like this. A is equal to this, right? And then you could do if not A, whatever. And if this had a good variable name, then it would make a lot of sense, like, liquid or whatever, and then if not liquid. Something like that. Why am I saying that? Because these, the freezing point and boiling point. So this text might be easier to read than that. Certainly, if T had a slightly better name, like temperature, that'd be better. If maybe 32 and 212 were variables as well, defined as freezing and boiling point, might still be easier to read. This reads, to me, easier to understand. So if I was trying to write the clearest code, I might lean towards doing this rather than doing this. Or I could put a comment, right, explaining it. So the not operator has higher precedence than and or. And I think we already talked about and has a higher precedence than or, because and is akin to logical multiplication and or is akin to logical addition. And as we already know, multiplication has a higher precedence than addition. Logic using the not operator can be difficult to read and analyze. Computer doesn't care if we do, so you might rewrite it to minimize the use of not. If it makes sense and it's, in this case, not liquid, yeah, I think that's easy to read. And by the way, De Morgan's law explains why if you're going to check to see if something's within a range, you use and. But if you're going to check to see if something's outside of a range, you use or. Okay, my logic here was totally stupid, right? How could something be both? Okay, no, it was okay. So if it's between 32 and 212, we're checking to see within a range, so we used and. And then this code here, check to see if it was outside of a range, so it used or. And why did we want to see if it was outside of the range? Because we did the not of this expression, which was checking to see if it was inside the range. Again, I think that's the clearest of all. So, common errors when making decisions. Using a single equal rather than the comparison operator, or vice versa. You saw me do that. You saw me set S out equal to a value. Kind of dumb. Inserting a semicolon after the Boolean expression in an if statement. Yeah, we've already talked about that. But if you have this, if x is equal to 1, and then you have a semicolon there, and then you have, some code here, then y is equal to 2. What this really means is this. And the fact that this is indented is ignored, right? So if x is equal to 1, do nothing. And then go ahead and do this. So this is going to be executed always, right? It's not subordinate to the if header there. Pretty much any time you start indenting, do not put a semicolon on the line above it. That's just the rule. So since we indented here, we would not put a semicolon on the line above it. And if you wrote it like this, and you saw that, then you would know it was wrong. That is an argument for the folks who like to put the braces on the same line as the if statement, right? Because then you're not even tempted to put a semicolon anywhere in there. Yeah, but you learn. Very rarely will you make that mistake after you've made it once, especially if it took you a long time to debug it. Experience is a harsh mistress. So a range check. That's a series of if statements that determine whether a value falls within a specified range. So if our sales amount is greater than 1,000, we set our commission equal to 8%. If it's greater than 500, then we set it equal to that. If it's less than $4.99, I'd set it equal to that. Now, this is not a good answer, and you probably already know why. It's because you'd want to use else ifs. These are either arranged in the wrong order, or they need to be else's. Right? If we put this one first, and then we put this one second, and this one third, by a miracle it would work, but if we just used else's, then it would be correct. And what do I mean by it's not correct? If we had the value 2,000, is sales amount greater than 1,000? Yeah, sure is. So we'd set it to that. Then we go to the next one. Is the sales amount greater than 500? It sure is. 2,000 is that. And so we'd give them the lower commission rate, and they'd be unhappy. So if you're doing a range check, if you're doing a whole bunch of mutually exclusive values, then go ahead and always use else's, rather than try to figure it out in your brain a way to write it in such a way, because you could write this code in such a way that you didn't need to use else's, right? If you have this code, if score is greater than or equal to 90, then G is equal to A. They made an A, and I'm just going to copy and paste this to make some changes, right? If score is greater than or equal to 80, then they made a B. Score is greater than or equal to 70, they made a C. One way you might want to fix that, well, what's the problem? Because if they made 100, then they're going to get a C. We don't want that. Fastest way to fix it, put else's. Some people would be tempted to do this. And score is less than or equal to 100, or something like that. Maybe the first one we don't complicate, but this one could be done like this. If score is less than 90 and the score is greater than or equal to 80, right? We do a proper range check like that. And then we could do if score is less than 80 and score is greater than or equal to 70. This is valid. It's not as elegant. It's not as readable. It would run more slowly because you'd have to do 2 checks rather than 1. So just use else's. So you would just say else if score is greater than or equal to 80, make it a B. And then you do another else if. And it'd be a real good idea to put a final trailing else in there to handle all the other cases, right? They made an F. Your teacher's a jerk and he doesn't give out D's. So else the grade is equal to an F. Like that. So that's what the next slide's going to be, is a correction of this. You'd want to do it like that, with else's. So, using and or appropriately, print an error message when an employee's hourly pay is less than $5.65 and an hourly pay is greater than $60. We've decided that the employees cannot earn less than that or more than that. And so solution, if less than that, if less than the minimum or greater than the maximum, print error in pay rate. You would not want to put an and there, right? You use ands to check to see if something is within a range, and you use or to check to see if something is outside of a range. Problem, make sure that the sales code is not A or B. If the sales code is not an A or a B, then the customer gets 10%. And here's what I was talking about, simplifying things. You could write this, if not, sales code equal A, or, and this is what the line underneath it is, and, or sales code is equal to B, right? You could check to see if it was either equal to one of those two things, and then you could not it, and then give the result, or you can do it kind of De Morgan's law on it, and say not whatever, and not whatever. I'm not really liking the way that's written. Did I goof that up? If sales code is, yeah, I did goof it up. If the sales code is not equal to A and the sales code is not equal to B, you just need to figure out how you want to do it. Do you like having the not equals there, or do you want to do two equals and an or and put the not there? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Works either way. But this expression is not true. If sales code is not equal to A or sales code is not equal to B, that'll never be true. Because if it's not equal to A, why is it never true? What if it wasn't A? If sales code is not equal to A, I think it's never false rather than never true. Because if I'm reading it right, if your sales code is an A, then this part would evaluate to false, but this part would evaluate to true. Am I wrong? It would never be false. So the little comment over here is wrong. This expression can never be false. So decision making in a GUI program, making a decision is no different than making one in a console app. You can use if, else if, and switch statements in a GUI as well as a console app. You click a button, an event is fired, and the user has chosen one of several radio buttons. The user has chosen an item from a list box. Alright, so they enter their age, they have a movie rating, they click discount. And so we would put some code in our button handler to do something like that. And so they type in an age, they type in a movie rating. They didn't use enums, but that's okay. We've decided that a child age is 12 and a senior age is 65. We convert that string, because everything that comes from a GUI is a string, to an age. Hopefully that works, because they didn't use Tryparse. It'll throw an exception. Then they convert the rating to a character. It's a text, but they convert it to a character. You could also just take the first value of the character, but this is a nice clean way of doing it. But a far cleaner way, again, would be to use Tryparse. And then you create your output label based on that. And then you compare your age against your constants. And why would you declare these as constants? You could even declare them outside in the namespace, so that if you needed to have a child age and a senior age, it would apply to multiple methods. Right? There may be more than one place where we need to know what the ages of the child and the senior are. So I would declare them out in the namespace, or at least in the class. Flowcharts. All right. Summary. Let's go look at what I had planned for the daily assignment. I don't think it's too horribly rigorous. But it's probably a little bit more practice in creating a WPF. May just be console. Let's go look. have a document for it. No, sorry. That's a restriction tab. Right. There we go. Here. Okay, so this is one that I'm supposed to make up on the fly rather than follow some instructions. Watch the video, follow along to create a console application that calculates volume and surface area for geometric shapes. So we could try to make this cool. We could ask them to enter the name of the shape and then calculate the volume and the surface area based on what they type. So why don't we just tack this on to our existing console app? But what we're going to do is we're going to offer them a sphere, a cube, and a cylinder, right? So we're going to offer them 3 shapes. How about a tetrahedron? That way we only have to ask for one value here. It's a perfect tetrahedron. A tetrahedron is just a 4-sided object. And I don't remember the formula for the surface area and the volume, but that is easy to Google. So we're going to declare an enum that is one of those 3 things. Then we're going to ask the user to type in what kind of shape. Now it'd be kinder if we just gave them a menu, right? You know, and we said choose 1 for this, 2 for that, and 3 for that. So maybe we'll consider doing that. That'd be pretty easy to do as well with a for statement to enum through the various types. I'd rather just print them out and make them type it in as an example. I'm kind of waffling on that. But once we know what type it is, then we could use some if-elses, or we could use some switches in order to, you know, ask for that information and then do the calculation. So let's go ahead and do that. You could create a new project if you wanted to. Pause it if you're going to do that. You could just tack it onto the same project that we already have. So here we go. I'm going to create an enum called shapes, or maybe just shape. Yeah, enum shapes. And we're going to say that we can do a sphere, a cube, or a tetrahedron. And since I can make this part of the class, I'm just going to leave it there. That's easy enough to remember. But I don't need to make this uppercase. That's kind of lame looking. So enum shapes, lowercase, sphere, cube, tetrahedron. So down here in the first part of main, I'm just going to, you know, get that fruit stuff out of the way. I'm hitting enter a whole bunch. What are we going to do? Yeah, we can make this a menu-based program to be so incredibly awesome. So while true, I like the while true break form of doing this kind of thing. What we're going to do is we're going to present our menu. Console.writeLine, pick what shape. Then we need to display a menu of the shapes. And I'm going to actually have to refresh my memory and go back to the enum assignment. The use of the enum to get the list of the text, which was right up here. For each color in enum.getValues, parentheses, type of color. That's a lot of text to try to remember. Yeah, I'm going to use Notepad to actually kind of steal the text because I didn't make this copy and pastable. So for each shape S or SH in enum.getValues, parentheses, type of, parentheses, shape, in parentheses, in parentheses, in parentheses. This is just going to return a series of strings, which we're going to write out. Alrighty. I'm going to copy and paste that, and then I'm going to pause it and let you type it in yourself. Alright. So for each shape, there we go. Long statement. Except I called it shapes, right? I'm regretting that. I'm going to go with it though rather than change it. For each shapes, SH in enum get values, type of shapes, then we want to print that out. Console.write placeholder 0, and then maybe a couple spaces to pad out the various shapes. Put some spaces between them, or /t or something like that to tab them out. Comma, sh. But we ought to let them quit as well. Parentheses, or Q to quit. So I've modified my right line here to say pick what shape, parentheses, or Q to quit. I wish I could kind of minimize that border there. I guess if I pull it over I can. No, it's not letting me grow the shape. Alright, well if I close my Solution Explorer I can get a little bit more text on the screen. Alrighty, so we've asked them pick what shape, we've displayed the list of the shapes. So let's use a read line. So string choice equals console.readLine. And now let's see if they typed in a Q. So if choice equals quote Q, and it's nice that in this language we can use equals rather than having to use dot equals like we did in Java. So choice equals Q, or let's let them type in a lowercase. Choice equals lowercase q, and there are other ways to accomplish that. For one thing, we could just convert it to uppercase. Then we will break. But let's print a message. Console.write. Fine. Okay, done. Excuse me, but I'm going to take out these braces just to get more code on the screen, even though it makes it a little bit harder to read. No, I can't take the braces out here because I need to break, unless I put everything in an else clause. I guess that's okay. No, it's not, because it's a while true. It would never bail. Okay, so I'm putting my curly braces back in, and I'm putting a break here so it'll exit the while loop. Now we need to convert it if we're going to do a case, if we're going to cast it. So let's make a color variable, excuse me, a shapes variable. Shapes sh is equal to, no, let's just declare it, and then let's declare BOK or something like that. We probably already have a BOK somewhere else, but at least we're inside. Okay, apparently I'd already declared sh. Well, this is interesting news to me. It's saying that this sh is still defined down here. Whereas to my mind, and in other languages I've seen, if you declare an iterator inside of a for each, then that variable is already, it disappears after the for each is done. All right, so I'm going to say shapes, S-H-A-P-E, single, not plural, with a lowercase s, is equal to enum dot, no, I can't do that, I keep forgetting. I got to declare my variable, and then I got to declare my Boolean. Bool shape OK. And then shape OK equals enum dot tryparse. And then we give them the string that they typed in. Choice, comma, true, because we want it to be case insensitive. And then finally, out, followed by the name of the shape OK the shape variable. And if shape OK, right, if shape OK is equal to true, then we can actually do some processing of it, either with switch statements or, with if statements. So, let's do this. Let's, have we even talked about while loops? Everybody knows what a while loop is, I hope. If shape OK equals false, but that's kind of spurious, right? I like the way that reads. But since the chapter is talking about not, I'm going to rewrite it to just say if not shape OK. Then I'm going to print an error message, and then I'm going to use the continue keyword. The continue keyword is like the break keyword, except what it does is it forces the loop to repeat immediately rather than the exit. So if shape is not OK, then we're just going to console write line a invalid choice message. Console.writeLine invalid choice. And then continue. The reason I'm doing that is I'm avoiding nested ifs, right? Because I don't need to put an else here, because if it continued, then that means, automatically that it's not going to hit this next line of code. Just like break meant automatically that it wasn't going to hit the next line of code. So you don't have to use else's if you're doing an if something break, or an if something continue, or an if something return. All right, now we're good. We want to use ifs or switches. What do we like better?
Like ifs.
All right, we're going to use ifs. Okay.
The switches have to be a string, and I don't think
No,
that's...
switches do not have to be a string.
Really?
We can do a switch on this enum just as well. Yeah, so, but whatever.
I tried
If
to deal
shape,
with the double and think, I guess I
but they
can-
can't be floating point values. Right. Switches cannot be floating point. They can be discrete values.
Was it like that in Java?
Yes, that's true. They can be strings or ints in Java. Okay, so if shape is equal to shapes dot cube, we need to ask them for the appropriate information. What is the edge length? Console dot write line parentheses edge length equals question mark space. Well, I guess if it's a right line, I'm just going to make it a right instead. Then we need to get the edge length. Yeah, I hate having to do all that tryparse. We should write a function that'll convert it to an int. Or nah. We'll tough it out. So string s is equal to console dot readline. And then bool b. But we're going to wind up doing some judicious cutting and pasting, right, to save our time. Bool will be okay is equal to okay, I cannot believe it. That I've forgotten the syntax for tryparse. One of y'all tell me what the syntax for tryparse is. Is it type.tryparse? That's probably it.
Yeah.
String dot tryparse parentheses. You still give me grief? String dot. For Pete's sake.
You don't have to do enum, do you? For Tryparse?
We shouldn't. I mean, we did when it was an enum.
Right. We made shape okay equal to enum.tryparse.
Int.tryparse word. Oh, well, that's what we want to do. We want to convert it to an int. Okay, I'm totally sorry for the brain glitch. Int dot, we already have a string, so we're not going to try to parse it back into a string. So int tryparse, s is our string, followed by out, and then our result, well, I haven't declared a result. I'm going to need an int. for the value. So going up to the line above it, and I'm going to say int value. And then bool BOK is equal to int tryparse s comma out value. I'm making it pretty generic so that I can just copy and paste this for my other else if cases. That's why I'm using boring names like value and s. All right, now we need to make sure they typed in something. So if not BOK, we're going to print out our error message. But I'm not going to do a break or a continue, so I am going to leave off the braces. Console.writeLine. Value must be a number. Else, and I could have thrown in a continue there, but else, let's actually do the calculation. The volume of a cube. Maybe we just do volume rather than surface area both, just to save ourselves some time. So double volume is equal to, and we're just going to multiply value times value times value, because that's how you get the volume of a cube. And then let's print our cute little message. Console.writeLine volume equals placeholder 1. Excuse me, placeholder 0, comma, volume. All right, it's going to be real easy to copy and paste this code to do the sphere. And maybe that'll be enough, right? Maybe we won't do the tetrahedron. Why don't we test it first, though? Go ahead and go nuts. There were build errors. No, I don't wish to run the last one. A variable name BOK cannot. Yeah, whatever. Okay, fine. Delete the definition right there where it says bool BOK is equal to int tryparse. I've already defined a BOK up higher. No, I haven't. I did do one called shape OK, right? So shape OK is equal to int tryparse, and then if not shape OK, I don't mind reusing that one. A local variable named s cannot be reused. Okay. String s. S is equal to console.readline. Cannot use s before it is declared. Ah, for Pete's sake. Okay. String st. For s val, right? It's a string s value. All right, so string s value is equal to console.readline. I had to change that one, which means I need to change this one as well. Now it is doing some funky stuff. Because, right, I don't declare BOK until down here. So what this is telling me, and I guess I'd forgotten this, is that if you declare a variable in a loop, it still exists outside of the loop, which is nuts. I'm going to have to figure out why that's actually the case. That's not the case in any of the other languages that we've learned.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was just a very small oversight on their part.
But it's a huge oversight, not a small oversight.
It is.
But okay, yeah. And if I had made this its own method, right, we could have just done a, a cube method and then invoked it. That might be kind of fun. But we got to get it to work. Come on, come on, come on. All right, sphere, cube, or tetrahedron. First, I'm going to type in garbage. Invalid choice. Cube. The edge length is 10, so the volume is 1,000. Awesome, it's working. Q to quit. Okay, done. And then it's doing the rest of the stuff that we had previously encoded. All right, I don't feel like doing all three of the shapes, but let's do a sphere as well. So I'm honestly just gonna copy and paste all this stuff. Make sure you get your braces right. Make sure that that one lines up with that one. And by the way, if you're ever stuck trying to figure out a bracing problem, if you move yourself on top of a brace, and then you hit Control, close brace. Okay, it's not working. I'm not gonna spend any time figuring that out. It was supposed to jump up here. Other editors do that.
I always
Forget
put the cursor right after the bottom brace, and it shows me, it highlights the top.
Right. So if I highlight this brace, it also will highlight that one and you can figure it out. So that's really what I want, is I'm going to highlight this whole shebang from there to there, and then I'm going to make it say else if shape is equal to cube dot sphere. And instead of edge length, it's going to be radius, right? So I'm just going to change that to radius. I don't need to change anything else until I get down here to my equation, because the formula for the volume of the sphere is obviously different than it is for the cube. Pardon me while I go look. I believe it's 4/3 pi r cubed, but all right, 4/3 pi r cubed. Remind me if we can use something like math.pi. But anyways, so the volume is equal to, and I'm not going to let it do integer math, so I'm not going to do 4/3. I'm going to force it to do floating point math. So 4.0 divided by 3.0 times math.pi. Yeah, that's nice. Math.pi in caps times value cubed, which I've already got there. I could also probably do math.pow value to the power of 3. Right. That looks a little bit cleaner. Maybe. Maybe you disagree. So there we go. Right. We copied it, we pasted it. We could do tetrahedron, but whatever. This is what our second if clause looked like. We've already handled the idea that it's not a valid shape, but let's go ahead and put a dangling else in that says else, console.writeLine not implemented yet. So a trailing else console.writeLine parentheses quote shape not implemented yet. Alrighty. We are done with what I wanted it to do. You've already got examples of using switches and cases with enums, so I don't mind just using if-else's here. Alright, pick a shape. Alright, we already tested out cube, so I'm going to check out sphere. The radius is equal to 1, so the volume is equal to 4. That's about right, I think. 4/3 pi r cubed. Yep, because that would be a diameter of 2, right? And a cube with an edge length of 2 would have a volume of 8. So, yeah, that makes sense to me. Alrighty, I hope this was educational. I know to some fair degree it's a rehash, but I liked us reinforcing the idea of the menu, doing the menu and doing a while loop and doing a break and a continue, which if you haven't taken C++ or Java, you won't be as familiar. No, even Python had break and continue. But if this is your first programming language, heaven forbid, then you haven't seen those before.
Does this language have is and as operators?
Is?
Or is that, am I thinking of Python?
Let's find out. Avoid using the is keyword in C#. The C# language has the is keywords, which allows you to check to see if it's of a given type. Well, then why are they telling us to avoid it? This is commonly helpful when dealing. Alright, this is just some guy's opinion. It's like the Big Lebowski. That's just like your opinion, man. So anyways, yes, there is an is. If Cinder is a drop-down list, do something. If X is an int, do something. Although useful, I would advise not using it and instead use as. as is a defensive cast, which means that a cast will be attempted, and if the object is not able to be casted, it will return null. So that's not bad, right? Data table DT is equal to sender as a data table, and then unfortunately, if that was a false statement, then it's not a data table. Otherwise, do something with it. All right. Valid, because doing this lets you, yeah, this is a safe form of casting. A cast will fail if you cast an invalid type, right? If it's not able to be converted to, one form to another. Well, I don't know if that's strictly true. If you're doing a more complex cast, then you can get errors. So that's interesting. You use the as keyword, you convert it from one to the other, and honestly, I don't remember what as does in Python. So do something very similar to that. Let's look it up. Not that it's germane to this. Python as keyword. The as keyword is used to create an alias. Import calendar as C, and then print c.month. All right, that's cool. I need to demonstrate that in my Python course. Okay, so yeah, it does have is, and they recommend using as to do a safe cast, and then check the result of that cast instead. All righty, any questions? We're all good. Good stuff.
Yeah, is isn't safe. It's not working for me.
Okay. Yeah, so is not safe. Is isn't